The sharpest people you have ever met are not smarter than you. They are just running their brain differently than you. Not because they were born with something you were not because they had access to better education, better resources, or better circumstances, but because at some point, knowingly or not, they started doing specific things that most people are completely unaware of. And the gap between a sharp mind and a slow one is not intelligence. It is habit, environment, and the way a person has trained their brain to process, resist, and engage with the world around them. Here is what I've come to understand after studying cognitive performance long enough to see past the surface advice that gets recycled endlessly on this topic. Most of what people are told about improving their brain is either too vague to apply or too focused on the obvious to actually move the needle. Sleep more, drink water, take fish oil. That is not what this video is about. What I am going to show you are the specific, underexamined methods that actually build a sharper mind, the ones that work at the level most people never think to reach. Pay close attention, because what comes next is not what you have heard before. The methods. 1. Boredom is not the enemy of a sharp mind. It is the condition that creates one. This is the most counterintuitive thing I'm going to tell you, and it is also the most important. Every time you reach for your phone the moment a queue gets too long, every time you fill silence with a podcast, every time you avoid a single unoccupied moment, you are robbing your brain of the condition it needs to do its most sophisticated work. The brain has a network that activates specifically during periods of doing nothing. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network. When it is running, the brain is not idle. It is integrating information, building connections between unrelated ideas, consolidating memory, and generating the kind of insight that does not arrive during focused work. The sharpest thinkers throughout history were not the most constantly occupied. They were the ones who protected unoccupied time with the same discipline most people reserve for their calendar. Your brain cannot build the connections that create genuine sharpness while it is constantly being fed external stimulation. It needs space. And in a world architecturally designed to eliminate every moment of that space, protecting it is one of the most cognitively powerful decisions you can make. Hold this, because Principle 3 is going to show you how this connects to the specific daily practice that produced some of the sharpest minds ever documented, and it takes less than 15 minutes. 2. The quality of your questions determines the quality of your thinking. Most people move through their days accepting the first answer their brain produces, the first interpretation of a situation, the first explanation for why something happened, the first conclusion available. And that first answer is almost never the sharpest one. The brain is an efficiency machine. It is designed to reach conclusions quickly using the least cognitive energy possible. That served humans well in environments where fast decisions were survival decisions. It does not serve you well when the quality of your thinking is the difference between an ordinary outcome and an exceptional one. The practice that separates sharp thinkers from average ones is deceptively simple. They hold the question longer. They ask, what else could be true? They deliberately pursue the interpretation that feels least comfortable before settling on the one that feels most convenient. This is not overthinking. Overthinking is running the same thought in circles. This is directed questioning, pushing the mind one layer deeper than it naturally wants to go. And it is a muscle. The more you use it, the less effort it requires. The less you use it, the more the brain defaults to the nearest available conclusion. 3. Writing sharpens the brain in a way that thinking alone never can. There is a specific cognitive phenomenon that occurs the moment you attempt to put a thought into written language. The The thought, which felt clear and complete inside your head, suddenly reveals all the places it was vague, circular, or assumed rather than reasoned. Writing is thinking made visible, and visible thinking can be examined, challenged, and refined in a way that internal thought cannot. The practice I am describing is not journaling in the conventional sense. It is not recording what happened today or how you feel about it. It is the deliberate attempt to take a complex idea, a problem you are working through, or a belief you hold, and write it out completely enough that someone with no context could follow the logic. If you cannot write it clearly, you do not understand it as well as you thought you did. That gap between what you believe you understand and what you can actually articulate is where the sharpening happens. Every time you close that gap in writing, your thinking becomes more precise, more structured, and more capable of handling complexity that previously felt overwhelming. Do not skip Principle 5. It is the sharpening method most connected to how you perform under pressure, and it is the one that almost no brain improvement content ever reaches. 4. The brain sharpens when you learn across domains, not just deeper into one. There is a specific type of intelligence that emerges not from mastering one field, but from carrying knowledge across multiple unrelated fields and finding the connections between them. The brain builds what neuroscientists call a rich associative network when it is exposed to diverse domains of knowledge. A person who understands history, biology, economics, and philosophy simultaneously has more cognitive cross-referencing available than a person who knows only one of those subjects with depth. This cross-referencing is where creative problem-solving actually comes from. Not from being the most specialized person in the room, but from being the person who can see that the pattern in this situation matches a pattern they encountered in a completely different context. Reading widely and deliberately is the fastest way to build this network, not just within your field, not just within your interest area, into domains that feel foreign and difficult and initially unrelated to anything you are currently working on. That discomfort is the feeling of new neural pathways being built. 5. Cognitive sharpness is built in recovery, not in effort. This is the principle that undermines almost every productivity framework built around doing more. The brain does not consolidate learning during the learning itself. It consolidates during rest. The neural connections that encode new skills, new information, and new thinking patterns are physically built during sleep, during stillness, and during the recovery periods between intense cognitive effort. This means that a person who does deep cognitive work for 4 focused hours and then genuinely recovers will consistently outperform a person who works for 12 hours in a state of continuous partial attention. The sharp mind is not the always-on mind. It is the mind that understands when to engage completely and when to disengage completely, when to push and when to recover, when to add information and when to let the brain do the integration work it can only do in silence. Most people never develop this skill because the culture around cognitive performance only rewards the effort side of the equation. The recovery side is invisible, but it is where the actual sharpening happens. You just absorbed 5 methods for building a sharper brain that the conventional conversation around cognitive performance almost never reaches. But here is the thing I need you to sit with. None of these methods produce results in a single day. What they do is compound, quietly, invisibly, in ways that are not measurable in the short term, but become undeniable over months. The person who protects their boredom, sharpens their questions, writes their thinking, reads across domains, and recovers with the same discipline they bring to their effort, that person will be operating at a cognitive level in 12 months that the version of themselves reading this today would not recognize. That is not motivation. That is how brain development actually works. The next video on the rational soul goes directly into the environmental design that makes all 5 of these methods sustainable instead of effortful. Because knowing what to do is only half the equation. The other half is building the conditions around you that make the right behavior the default rather than the exception. Most channels stop at the list. The rational soul builds the system behind it. Subscribe to the Rational Soul. Turn on every notification. Do not miss the next one. The sharpest version of you is not waiting on more information. It is waiting on the decision to build the right environment around what you already know. Do not miss the next one. More truth like this. Subscribe to the Rational Soul now.